ladies, welcome to Summer Love Day 3, and what we're going to be talking about is how to get a conversation started by saying these 5 different ways that'll really help you get that spark going. So the 5 ways to start a conversation: 1 is through compliments, 2 is through asking for help, 3 is asking his opinion, 4 is like acknowledging or appreciating something, and 5 is bantering. And so I'm going to give you some examples of all of this. And the reason why it's important that we start to learn how to start a conversation, and why we were looking at yesterday about really making eye contact and smiling, and the reason is most men, I'm going to say most, not all, are actually very shy themselves and are nervous to approach a woman. And you're going to realize, as I keep sharing, that a lot of guys who are these high quality men aren't really used to going out and talking to women and starting a conversation. It's typically the men that are like your pickup artists who are doing it often, that are really smooth, that can get a conversation started or come out and approach a woman. And so most men don't have that skill, unless they've been drinking, right? That liquid courage. So let's say most men aren't, and you've got the eye contact, you're making the smiling, or maybe you're out and about and you see him and you're going to want to start a conversation. And so here's some examples. So a client of mine was riding one of these gondolas from hiking. She had come down from hiking, and we had talked about eye contact and smiling, given her the tips we were talking about yesterday and the other day. And she's all sweaty, and she's like, oh my gosh, I have all days to really talk to a guy. But she noticed off in the corner there was this man there. And so she kind of made eye contact. He really didn't do anything. So she went over to him and said, hi, what did you think about the hike? Right? So she is acknowledging and asking his opinion. And so he started talking about the hike and how much he enjoyed it. And so that started the conversation that then led to him asking for her number to do more hikes together and to explore that. Okay, so that's one example of how to do it, where you're asking his opinion, getting his opinion, or even just acknowledging what he did. You could say like, wow, you look like you had a really good time on that hike. You're just as sweaty as I am. Or you might say, if you're going to use the compliment, you can say, wow, that was a really good hike. You must have done well. You've accomplished it. Way to go, right? So what we're looking at is pulling in from your environment to start the conversation. So another example, I had a client when she was at the airport getting luggage. And so an example of how you could ask for help is that she had quite a few bags, and there was this kind of cute guy kind of near her. So she was smiling, making eye contact, and then she ended up asking for his help. She's like, it's going to seem funny, but would you mind helping me lift my bag? It's a little awkward and I'm not really great at it. And sure enough, he was super eager, got her bag off the carousel. They started talking about where they were going. They ended up going to a Mexico trip, and they ended up sharing and ended up connecting. So that's another example, right? So asking for help, okay? Complimenting. I was out on the street, and I was walking, and I looked over, and I was in this parking lot, and this guy came out of his car, and he had these suspenders on. And I was like, to myself, I'm like, wow, not every man can pull off suspenders. Impressive. And so as I'm walking along the street, I kind of yell at him. I'm like, I like your look. Way to go. Right? I said, not every man can look good in suspenders. And he was like kind of shocked, looked around and was like, is she talking to me? And so I smiled, and then you could see his face lit up, and he was like, oh, like kind of like boisterous, like, yeah, I've got this. And then he was like coming around his car ready to approach me. And at that time, I actually was already seeing somebody, so I didn't really want the conversation to go any further. So I said, yeah, it was really good. You've got great style. And I just kept walking. Had I wanted to be there more, I would have just continued the conversation and let it to go somewhere else. Okay? When you're looking at bantering, that's where you're kind of joking, where you're creating some like a bit of a tease. It's natural, it's fun, it's not putting the guy down, but it's kind of like, okay, oh my gosh, that probably was like the worst look. My phone just froze. I hope it was a good frozen look. Anyways, bantering is really coming up with that humor. So an example, oh my goodness, my fiance was the fact that he was on the escalator, and he was kind of what you might say like the slow side, right? Where we have someone stands and then other people walk beside them. And he happened to be on the slow, or the side that people are walking on, and he just stopped. And I said, you know, you're on like the fast side, you need to walk, right? And he kind of looked at me and he's like, what are you talking about? And so I kind of teased him. I said, you better move, or someone's going to walk into you, or they're going to push you out of the way. And so we chatted. By the time we got to the top of the escalator, we were in a conversation that led somewhere. So all I'm suggesting, ladies, is looking around your environment to start something of a conversation. And the more comfortable you get at it, the easier it will be. But the key is, and you'll hear me say it throughout this whole entire series, is we can't be attached to the outcome. And what I mean by that is if we start a conversation, we hope it's going to go somewhere, meaning like we hope he's going to ask for our number, or we hope he's going to continue talking to us, or we hope he'll even just acknowledge us. If we have that intention and it doesn't happen, we'll feel so disappointed that we won't do it again. But if we take on this attitude like this is fun, I'm going to see what happens, and it's really carefree, you're going to have this energy about you that's a lot more attractive and desirable, and the conversation or the eye contact will work. And so what we want to look at is creating some fun in all of this. So this week, as we started yesterday, really making eye contact and smiling, this time now for the rest of the week, try to start a conversation, right? Use any one of these lines, right? The appreciation, acknowledging, using a bit of banter, you're looking at complimenting him, asking for his help, or even getting his opinion. Okay, any one of those is going to work to create a conversation starter. Okay, and then as the conversation goes, the question then says, well, what do I do with it, right? So one of the ladies in the last question was asking about, well, she met the guy in a grocery store and they kind of chatted, right? And then what do you do with that conversation, right? It's like, yeah, and hope you have a good night cooking up your squash, right? Whatever it is. And so it feels kind of weird. And so what I would suggest, ladies, in these moments is then how to seed it. And what I mean by that is creating opportunities throughout the conversation where you're giving indication that you'd be interested in exploring something more. So for example, the woman on the hike, right? She's on the gondola. So seeding that conversation would look like, yeah, I really enjoy hiking. I found this really great hike up here. It would be good to check it out. Have you done that hike? Or you could even be like, yeah, if you were to ever go on a hike, I would totally be up for it. Or if you take my number, I would totally be interested if you called and we'd gone on that hike. Right? So you can suggest it really subtly, either offering your number or suggesting that you'd go on a hike. An example might be, say you're at that grocery store and the conversation started. Maybe you're asking for help, or he asked you, or you asked help about like what to buy or what choice he thought of or what he was making that night, right? Conversation starts, and then where does it go? So you can see it like, oh, I've really heard of this great restaurant, or have you heard of this really good recipe? It sounds like something you'd be interested in. Or have you tried this brand of something, right? You're seeding it. And then what it will look like is I would totally be up to showing you, or I would totally be up for taking you and looking at that. And what you're doing is creating the indication that you're open to doing something further, okay? So that's one way, right? Seeding the conversation. Now, some men will totally pick up on it. Other men are oblivious. They don't even realize that you're telling them these hints. And because they're just as nervous and they're not really maybe as comfortable, they may not then start anything. They might not even ask. And it's typically because they in their mind think, well, she's really pretty, she's really outgoing, she's talking to me, she's smiling at me, maybe she's taken, or maybe I'm out of her league, or maybe she's with someone, or he has his own stories. And so we want to create the opportunity, that dialogue, to create something for him to know that it's safe for him to ask for your number. And so what that looks like is saying like something cheeky. You could say, hey, if you happen to ask for my number, I may consider giving it to you. Or if you happen to ask me out on that hike, I might say yes. Or if you happen to actually like make dinner, I might consider like testing out one of your recipes. Or when you get back from your holiday, I might consider like sharing my pictures and sharing stories from my holiday with you, right? You're putting in the idea that you're curious and that you're willing to explore something further. So you're giving him that indication. And I'm going to share more about this tomorrow of how to get him to ask for your number. But today, just think about these conversation starters. And then tomorrow, I'm going to help you lead into more ideas of how this looks. So again, you've got those 5 different ways. See what it feels like. Test it out. Get out of that comfort zone, ladies. And really push yourself to see what you could do of interacting with some men. Can't wait to hear about it. Share your experiences in the group. And we will see you tomorrow. Talk to you then.